David, what are you doing at home? My wife of 28 years, Anna, asked, stepping through the garage door into the house. She froze for a moment when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, not even 10 feet away. Her body partially blocked the tall, younger man trailing behind her, but I could still make out enough of him to know he didn't belong here. As usual, Anna looked stunning. She had a presence that always turned heads. Her auburn hair, cut just above her shoulders, framed her face perfectly. She was still dressed for work in a crisp white blouse, though I couldn't help but notice that an extra button was undone, revealing a glimpse of her mouth-watering cleavage between her full 38D breasts. Her black linen skirt hugged her hips and accentuated her long, sculpted legs, while her 3-inch heels added that extra sway to her step. The curve of her backside in that skirt was as mesmerizing as ever. Pure perfection. I sat there, considering her ridiculous question, and responded with one just as absurd. I live here. The irritation that had become far too common with her lately flickered across her face as she snapped back. Of course you live here. What I'm asking is why you're home at 3:30 in the afternoon. Anna and I had been together for nearly 3 decades, and I often joked with friends that I'd been in love with her from the moment we met. I had first crossed paths with her during an appointment at her company. Anna, back then just an administrative assistant, had been tasked with escorting me from the lobby to the executive suite for my meeting. Hours later, when she walked me back to the lobby, I worked up the nerve to ask her out to dinner. That was the beginning of everything, or so I had thought. By now, the younger man had moved to stand beside her. I half expected him to smirk at me, but instead, his intelligent eyes seemed wary, maybe even concerned. Clearly, whatever plan they had cooked up wasn't playing out the way they had imagined. I leaned back in my chair and fixed my gaze on Anna. I guess I could ask you the same thing, I said evenly. What are you doing home an hour and a half early? Anna and I had been inseparable from our very first date. Over the years, I poured everything I had into her and our family. I worked hard to build my small insurance brokerage into a thriving business, all while supporting her career. Anna had gone to college while balancing work and home life, eventually earning her bachelor's degree after 6 years. She climbed the corporate ladder, moving from an administrative role into human resources, and finally becoming the head of HR in her company. I was proud of everything she had achieved, and for nearly 3 decades, I had loved her without question. But as I looked at her now, at the stranger she had become over the past few weeks, I could feel the cracks forming in that unconditional love. Calm down, I told myself. Keep it together. I wanted to break her as completely as she had broken me when I discovered what she really was. A lying, cheating slut. I forced myself to smile, my signature crooked grin, and she responded with that same cool, guarded tone. We came home early to talk to you. My eyes narrowed. We? I asked sharply, holding her gaze. The man at her side took the opportunity to step forward, extending a hand toward me with practiced confidence. Mister, I'm Mike. I'm the new attorney at firm, and I've been working closely with Anna for the past couple of months. I didn't even glance at his outstretched hand. I was too busy battling the primal urge rising in my chest, the urge to lunge across the table, wrap my hands around his scrawny neck, and squeeze until his worthless eyes popped out of his skull. Instead, I gritted my teeth, locked my stare on Anna, and growled, Is that right? I know exactly who and what you are. For the first time, I saw something in Anna's expression that I hadn't seen in weeks: concern. Her confident demeanor faltered, and then she winced when I followed up with, You threatened to cut the balls off the last person who disrespected you, but now you're letting this pile of crap waltz into our home? I jabbed a finger in his direction, letting the venom drip from my words. Anna looked caught off guard, confused, even. That was rare for her. She was the kind of woman who always had a plan, no matter the situation. I was sure she and her little boy toy had rehearsed this conversation, mapping out every possible scenario. To her, I was probably already labeled a compliant cuckold. I glanced at him, and a grin crept onto my face. His jaw tightened, and I could practically see the panic bubbling under his polished exterior. I imagined his guts twisting into knots, much like mine had been for weeks now. This was their moment to stage their little show, but I had news for them. It wasn't going to play out the way they'd envisioned. I inhaled deeply, forcing the rage and disgust I'd been carrying for weeks into some dark corner of my chest. Time to throw them off balance again. "Why don't I make us all some drinks?" I said, forcing a casual tone. "We can sit and talk in the living room." Anna's voice was unusually subdued. "A glass of wine, please," she replied. When I turned to the other guy, he hesitated. He was wary, smart, at least in that sense. "Anna mentioned you enjoy bourbon and craft beer," he said. I nodded. "I do." As I stood and headed for the bar in the family room, I heard them whispering urgently behind me. They must have thought they were being discreet, but their hushed voices betrayed their nerves. A few minutes later, I joined them in the living room. They were seated side by side on the sofa, looking more like partners in crime than anything else. I handed Anna a glass of her favorite wine and gave the other guy a tulip glass filled with amber ale. As for me, I brought 2 fingers of bourbon in a heavy glass and took the armchair directly across from them. Lifting my glass in a mock toast, I took a small sip, savoring the burn as it traveled down my throat. The other guy raised his glass and followed suit. He studied the amber liquid for a moment, swirling it like he was some kind of beer connoisseur. "This is one of the most complex amber alesh I've ever had," he commented, clearly trying to make small talk. I leaned back, smiled, and replied, "Pabst Blue Ribbon." His eyes flared with anger, and Anna looked downright baffled. "What?" she asked. "You've always said Pabst Blue Ribbon is worse than Donkey Piss, the worst beer ever made." She was halfway through her sentence when she noticed the smirk on my face. I laughed, and that's when Anna snapped. "You're such an ass. We came home to have a calm, adult conversation with you, and you've done nothing but act rude and condescending." I tilted my head and smiled faintly. "Rude and condescending? You're right. Maybe we should start this talk of yours. I'm sure I'm about to learn a thing or two about polite, loving conversations from my ever-faithful wife." Anna's face tightened, and she couldn't meet my eyes. Her partner jumped in, trying to salvage whatever dignity he had left. "David, we came here to—" I cut him off. "You had it right the first time." He blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" "When you first addressed me," I said, "you called me Mr. I'd prefer. Actually, I insist that you stick with that. Or sir, if you'd like." I shrugged, letting the words hang in the air. His face turned red, and I turned back to Anna before he could find his voice again. "What is it you wanted to talk about?" I asked her directly, ignoring the other guy entirely. When he opened his mouth to chime in, I snapped, "I'm talking to my wife. Sit there, drink your complex amber donkey piss, and shut the hell up." Anna's temper boiled over. "Your behavior this afternoon is disgusting," she shouted. "This needs to stop now." I nodded thoughtfully, pretending to mull over her words. Then I asked, "Do you think my behavior today is better or worse than yours over the past 5 or 6 weeks?" That stopped her cold. "What are you talking about?" she asked, half worried and half confused. I locked eyes with her, letting the weight of my silence do the work. The other guy seemed frozen, holding his breath like he already knew their carefully rehearsed plan had gone completely off the rails. "I don't even know what pisses me off more," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "The fact that you let him shove his worthless little banana up your dried-up old ass, or that you think I'm stupid enough not to notice." The stunned look on Anna's face was almost comical. For a moment, she just stared at me, completely speechless. Then her eyes narrowed, and in a low voice, she asked the obvious, "You know?" I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch before answering. "It seems I've got more friends at your office than you do. 2 weeks ago, I got an anonymous email from someone at firm. They wanted to give me a heads up about your little extracurricular activities. Attached were 3 pictures. You and lover boy here, on a picnic at park. Hand-holding, kissing, the whole romantic package." Anna opened her mouth, but the words seemed stuck. She finally managed, "I'm sorry you had to find out that way." She looked like she was about to say more, but I didn't give her the chance. "So," I said sharply, "are you asking for a divorce?" "No," she said quickly. She slid to the edge of the couch, leaning forward and resting her elbows on her knees. Her voice was passionate, almost pleading. David, I love you. I don't want a divorce. What Mike and I have, it's just a short-term fling. He's new to city, doesn't know many people, and hasn't made any friends yet. Once he's settled, I'm sure he'll find someone else. A regular girlfriend. It's not what you think. It's nothing serious. I felt a cold, bitter laugh rise in my throat. Well, I hate to break it to you, Anna, but that doesn't work for me. I signed up for a monogamous relationship with a loving wife. Instead, I got a lying, cheating woman who let herself become a cum dump. A divorce works much better for my future plans. Anna flinched at my words but pressed on. David, just stop. I don't want a divorce, and deep down, I don't think you do either. This is nothing. It's a one-time fling. I was attracted to Mike, and I wanted a little excitement in my life. That's all it was. It's never happened before, and it won't happen again. I swear. I took a slow sip of my bourbon, letting the burn give me focus. After a long pause, I looked up at her and said calmly, First of all, your promises mean absolutely nothing. Everyone in this room knows you're a liar. Anna's face turned red, and she was about to lash out when I cut her off. And second, I added, why the hell should I believe this is your first affair? For all I know, it's your 51st. Her expression softened, and she leaned in closer, her tone almost desperate. David, please. You need to think this through. We've spent decades building a life together, building our family. Our daughter married now, and she's even talking about starting her own family. We're so close to being able to slow down and enjoy retirement. Don't let a stupid mistake ruin everything we've worked so hard for. My fling with Mike will be over and forgotten before you know it. I promise. Without a word, I stood up, grabbed my glass, and walked to the den to refill it. I didn't bother asking if anyone else wanted another drink. As I poured more bourbon, I smiled to myself, knowing full well my lack of manners hadn't gone unnoticed by the two idiots whispering in the living room. When I returned, they were huddled together on the couch, their heads close in urgent conversation. The moment I stepped into the room, Mike straightened up and cleared his throat. May I say a few things, mister? The floor is yours, I said flatly, leaning back into my chair. He took a deep breath, clearly trying to gather his thoughts. Anna is right, he began. Our relationship is just a short-term fling. I regret leading a married woman into an affair. It's something I've never done before, but we just hit it off. She's an incredible woman, as I'm sure you know. But mister, your threat of divorce, while understandable in the heat of the moment, would be a mistake long-term. You've invested decades into this marriage. Don't throw it all away. He paused for a moment, clearly gauging my reaction before continuing. Anna was initially worried about the prenuptial agreement her father made you both sign, but I can assure you, as an attorney, that it wouldn't hold up in court. A nearly 30-year-old prenup is outdated. Any competent lawyer would have it thrown out without a second thought. And besides, I don't think you have the evidence to prove anything beyond some innocent public flirting. I stared at him, barely able to suppress my disgust. How my wife had fallen for this idiot was beyond me. You finished? I asked coolly. He nodded. Well, for starters, I said, turning to Anna, why the hell are you taking legal advice from a corporate attorney who graduated in the bottom quarter of his class, from Texas Southern University City Law School, no less? You know that school is ranked one of the top 10 worst in the country, right? Mike's face flushed, and he looked like he wanted to speak, but I didn't let him. One of my mottos has always been, know thy enemy. I smirked before shifting my attention back to Anna. What's your plan, Ann? Where do we go from here? She hesitated, taking a moment to compose herself before finally saying, Mike and I are going to spend the weekend together. I'll be staying at his apartment tonight, and tomorrow morning, we're leaving for Los Angeles City. We'll be back Sunday. Even though I already knew their plans, hearing her lay them out so casually was like taking a knife to the chest. Her audacity was breathtaking, and for a moment, I couldn't even speak. I hoped she could see the crushing sadness in my eyes as I asked, So, not only have you been sharing your body with this piece of garbage, but you're also planning to share our weekend getaway with him? Her face twisted with guilt, But I kept going. For 29 years and 4 times a year, every year since we've been married, we've gone to Los Angeles together. Do you even remember all the incredible memories we made? The breathtaking sights, the Broadway shows, the concerts, the games? You've destroyed it all. Every one of those moments we shared, gone, smashed into pieces. And for what? So you could parade around with this? I threw a disgusted glance at Mike. Anna's expression wavered. I could tell she wanted to respond, but I didn't hear a word of it. My own thoughts were screaming louder than anything she could say. End it. End it now. I turned to Mike and asked coldly, "Does your wife know about this?" Before he could answer, and cut in sharply. "Davide, stop. Mike's a widower. His wife passed away years ago. He would never cheat on his wife." Even Mike flinched at that ridiculous defense, and I smirked at her desperation. "Unlike you, huh, Anne?" I shot back. Without giving either of them time to recover, I stared at Mike. "Is that true? You're a widower?" His eyes darted nervously between Anna and me before he hesitantly said, "Why, yes." I nodded, reached down, and pulled a manila folder out of the backpack sitting by my chair. Slowly, I opened it, scanned the first page, and began reading aloud. Dr. Olivia, Emergency Department Surgeon, Ascension Hospital in Detroit. Husband, Mike. Daughters, Maria, 10, and Lisa, 8. Dr. Olivia has officially resigned her position effective May 20 and will be relocating to join her husband immediately after the school year ends. She has accepted a position at hospital and medical center. Anna's jaw dropped as the color drained from her face. "You lied to me," she stammered, barely able to get the words out. "I couldn't help it," I laughed. A long, bitter laugh that echoed through the room. "Can you believe this?" I bellowed. "A cheat and a liar lies to another cheat and liar. What's the world coming to?" Mike reached out to take Anna's hand, and I almost shouted at him to get his hands off her. But then I realized I didn't care. Not anymore. "Anne, baby," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I did lie. I couldn't help it. You're so sexy and beautiful. I wanted you. I needed you. And I lied so I could have you." He stood, still holding her hand, and tried to coax her. "Let's go back to my place and talk. Tomorrow, we'll head to Los Angeles. We'll have a great weekend, just you and me. And when we get back, we'll still have 3 weeks before my family arrives. After that, you can be a full-time wife, and I'll be a full-time husband and father." Anna hesitated for a moment, then stood. She took his hand and turned to me, her voice soft but steady. "After this weekend, I promise I'll give up Mike completely. I'll come home Sunday, and I'll be the same loving wife I've always been." We stared at each other for a long moment. I wondered if she could hear it, my already shattered heart breaking into even smaller pieces. I took a deep breath and said, "I've sat here, letting you both explain your little fling and how, supposedly, it won't affect my marriage in the long term. Now, I'd like to ask for the same courtesy. Give me 30 minutes to lay out my plans for the future." They exchanged hesitant glances, clearly unsure. I pushed harder. "The least you can do is give me 30 minutes. Reluctantly, they sat back down. I reached for the TV remote, pointed it at the screen, and pressed a few buttons. The television lit up, and I leaned back in my chair. "I've set up a few Zoom calls," I said evenly. When 2 faces appeared on the screen, I spoke into the microphone. "James, Lou, can you hear me?" "We can, David," James replied. I turned to Anna, gesturing at the screen. "And you obviously know our family attorney, James. Let me also introduce you to his partner, and my new divorce attorney, Lou." I paused just long enough for the words to sink in. "And gentlemen, this is Mike, corporate attorney extraordinaire." Anna and Mike looked absolutely stunned. I could almost see the gears in their heads turning as they tried to process what was happening. Lou jumped in without missing a beat. "Mrs. Anna, I'll be representing your husband in the upcoming divorce proceedings. The papers were officially filed with the court earlier this afternoon. I'd advise you to retain an attorney as soon as possible and make arrangements to be served." "I'll give you until the end of the day on Monday," Lou said firmly. "If we haven't heard from your attorney by then, we'll hire a process server to ensure you're properly served. The divorce has been filed, citing infidelity as the cause. We have a private investigator's report that documents, in extensive detail, using audio, video, and telecommunications evidence, your affair with Mr. Mike. As Lou delivered his final statement, I tossed another manila folder onto the coffee table in front of Anna. The sharp slap of it hitting the table made both of them jump. That's a copy of the divorce petition, including the PI report, I said coolly, watching as Mike instinctively reached for the folder while Anna stared blankly at the screen. Lou didn't miss a beat. We will also be insisting that the prenuptial agreement is enforced in its entirety. I trust you're aware that every 2 years, as part of Mr. David's regular legal reviews, all family business and personal legal matters, including the prenuptial agreement, are updated to comply with the most current state laws. We have your signed and notarized acknowledgement of each revision over the past 28 years. I am fully confident the agreement will hold up in court. Anna's hands fidgeted in her lap as Lou continued. As of last night, following a unanimous vote by the board of directors at firm, you have been relieved of all corporate responsibilities and are no longer associated with the firm in any capacity. You have 7 days to return your company car. Your corporate credit cards have been paid off and canceled. We've also paid off and closed the 3 joint credit cards you shared with my client, and all joint savings, checking, and retirement accounts have been frozen pending the terms of the prenuptial agreement. Per the prenup, we expect an 80-20th split of liquid assets in Mr. David's favor. Mr. David will retain sole ownership of the marital home, free and clear. Furthermore, Lou continued, we've filed a request with the court to expedite your eviction, given that you've occasionally shared a residence with Mr. Mike. We will argue that it is easier for you to relocate. You will have 30 days to remove your personal belongings from the property. There will be no alimony, and since child support isn't applicable, the financial settlement is straightforward. Additional minor claims are detailed in the petition. Your attorney can explain those to you. Lou paused and glanced at me through the screen. David, have I missed anything? You've hit all the highlights, Lou. Thanks, I replied evenly. With that, the screen went black. Anna jumped to her feet, panic overtaking her. Wait, she shouted. Her eyes darted to me. Get them back. I have questions. I laughed bitterly and shook my head. That's not how this works, Anne. You'll need to hire your own lawyer to get your answers. Her eyes burned with anger as she growled, I'm going to destroy you. I smirked, my gaze shifting to her co-conspirator. Hey, Mike, I said mockingly. What does your near-genius legal mind say the odds are of her actually destroying me in this divorce? Mike stayed silent, his lips pressed into a tight line. Anna, now visibly deflated, sank back onto the couch, curling into herself. My grin widened as I picked up the remote again. Well, let's keep the ball rolling, I said, pointing it at the TV. The screen lit up again, and another Zoom call began. Adam, can you hear me? Gotcha, David, Adam replied. I've got a conference call coming up, so I'll make this quick. Adam's gaze shifted to Mike. Mike, you're fired. Effective immediately. Your personal belongings are being removed from your office as we speak. They'll be boxed and left in the lobby. If they aren't picked up within 24 hours, they'll be thrown out. You will not be receiving a recommendation. Then Adam sighed, his voice turning heavier as he addressed Anna. And I can't tell you how disappointed I am. As a senior member of my staff, your behavior is inexcusable. That said, 28 years of exemplary service can't be ignored. Your position in Hartford has been eliminated, but I'm offering you the same role at our Albany, New York facility. You'll have a week to decide and 30 days to relocate. The screen went dark again. Anna collapsed into sobs, burying her face in her hands. Mike slouched back into the couch, his confidence visibly deflated. I looked at Mike, my smirk daring him to say something. His eyes met mine, and I saw the rage boiling beneath his calm facade. He was younger, bigger, clearly spoiling for a fight. I figured Mike was stronger than me, at least physically, but unfortunately for him, he was also as dumb as a sack of rocks. As his rage built to a breaking point, I calmly waved the remote in my hand and pointed it at the TV, pressing the button for my next move. The screen lit up again, and I asked, Dr. Olivia, can you hear me? Anna and Mike froze, their faces drained of color, mouths hanging open like deer caught in headlights. The image of a beautiful blonde woman filled the screen. Mike looked like he wanted to crawl under the couch as Olivia began to speak. Mike, I've filed for divorce. You can expect to be served in the next few days. The kids and I will remain in our city. I've been able to keep my current position at the hospital. Olivia, please. Mike begged, his voice rising. We can work this out. It was just a fling. Olivia's disgusted expression spoke volumes. I've been doing some digging since Davis reached out to me, she said. Turns out, this is the 5th job you've lost because you couldn't keep your pants zipped. After receiving the PI report, I asked him to do a little extra research. Mrs. Ann, she continued, turning her attention to Anna. Do the names Alice, Lisa Marit mean anything to you? Anna's lips moved, but no sound came out. Olivia laughed, a bitter edge to her voice. Don't bother answering. It's rhetorical. I already know. They're all associates of yours. And yes, Mike had flings with every single one of them. You weren't special, Anna. You were just another one of his side pieces. Now, tell me where to send your crap, Mike, because you're no longer welcome in my house. The screen went black before Mike could respond, and he exploded. I'm going to kill you. He shot up from the couch, fists clenched, but before he could take another step, I pulled my CT-45 from between the chair cushions and aimed it directly at him. Mike froze. His face turned pale, and he looked like he might vomit. It was exactly the reaction I was hoping for. You've got 2 choices, asswipe, I said calmly. You can either sit down and shut the hell up, or you can try your luck, and I'll blow your left ball off. Your call. He sank back onto the couch, shaking. I wasn't sure if I felt satisfied or disappointed, but I was grateful he'd chosen wisely. I turned to Anna. She was pale, her cheeks streaked with tears, and her mascara was smeared all over her face. She looked absolutely wrecked. I've been seeing a counselor for the last 2 weeks, I said evenly. Anna groaned and buried her face in her hands. It's funny, isn't it? You cheat, you lie, and you spread your legs for this idiot. But I'm the one who needs a mental health expert. How screwed up is that? I let out a bitter laugh. After a moment, I continued. Doctor asked me something during one of our sessions, something that stuck with me. She said, do you understand the old saying, love is blind? It was like flipping on a light switch in a dark room. I loved you so much, and that I was blind to who you really are. If it weren't for that anonymous email, I'd still be in the dark. I loved you so completely that I ignored every flaw. To me, you didn't even have warts. But now I see you clearly. And I hope you know this. You will never find anyone who loved you as much as I did. Anna cried harder, rocking back and forth on the couch. I'm going to keep seeing Doctor. I think it's important to have someone to confide in. Someone you can trust with your deepest thoughts after going through something like this. I never imagined someone I loved so much could humiliate and disrespect me this way. But the good news is, I'll get over it. I'll get over the hurt, the humiliation, and I'll get over you. I paused for a moment, letting my words sink in. I told DR about my plans for today. She wasn't thrilled, thought it was too much revenge. She was okay with the first 3 Zoom meetings, but she warned me against the next one. She said it might set me back in my recovery. And maybe she's right. Maybe this will hurt me, but it's going to hurt you even more. I held up the remote and waved it at Anna. She shrank into the couch, panic written all over her face. When I pressed the button, all eyes turned to the screen. A familiar face appeared. Oh no, Angela whispered, her voice trembling. Oh no, please God, no. I love you, Daddy, said my daughter. I love you too, sweetheart, I replied. Anna shrieked. How could you do this to me? Our daughter's face was calm but icy. I've been listening, Mom. I've heard everything you and your boyfriend have said. You disgust me. Sweetheart, please, Anna begged, tears streaming down her face. It's complicated. Complicated, she shot back. I'm 26 years old, Mom. I'm married. I understand more than you think. Your situation isn't complicated. It's grotesque. Anna tried to explain. I've just been so lonely since you moved away. I missed you so much. Daughter looked at her, disgusted. So, it's my fault you became a liar and a cheat? No. That's not what I'm saying. Anna protested. It doesn't matter, our daughter said firmly. I think we all need a break from you. And sobbed. I'll come to you this weekend. We can talk. That's not happening, our daughter replied. For two reasons. First, you'll be in Los Angeles with your unemployed, newly divorced boyfriend. And second, Scott and I are hosting a private celebration near Cape Cod this weekend. A celebration? Anna asked desperately. What are you celebrating? She smiled coldly. Since you weren't invited, I'll tell you. I'm 3 months pregnant. We're having a baby boy. Anna gasped. I'm your mother. I insist you let me be there. That's not happening, Mom. I want my baby shower to be full of love and joy, not the lies, cheating, and disrespect you bring to everything these days. Goodbye, Mom. The screen went dark for the 4th time, and Anna crumpled into sobs. I stood, tucking the pistol into the back of my jeans. I'm going out for dinner. I'll be back in 2 hours. Pack some clothes and essentials. You won't be allowed back into this house until the court rules on the divorce petition. That should take about a week. Turning to Mike, I added, you've seen what I'm capable of. You've got 3 days to leave the state. If you're still here on Monday, I'll make sure you're crippled. Literally. I opened the front door, glanced back at the defeated pair, and smiled. Enjoy your weekend in Los Angeles. It's supposed to be beautiful. And with that, I walked out. It had been 8 months since Anna walked out of my life. 8 months since I signed the divorce papers and closed the door on a marriage I thought would last forever. 8 months of therapy, late nights staring at the ceiling, and relearning who I was without her. The house was quieter now. Too quiet sometimes, but I had learned to fill the silence with things that mattered. Long walks, books I hadn't touched in years, and reconnecting with friends I'd lost in the chaos of a toxic relationship. That's how I found myself sitting in the back corner of a bookstore cafe on a crisp Saturday afternoon. A paperback in one hand, a cup of steaming black coffee in the other, and the soft hum of conversations around me. It wasn't much, but it had become my sanctuary. Excuse me, is this seat taken? I looked up, startled out of my thoughts, and saw her. She had a warm smile, the kind that makes you feel like the sun just peeked out from behind the clouds. Her auburn hair was tied in a loose ponytail, and she wore a dark green sweater that matched her eyes perfectly. No, not at all, I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. Thanks, she said as she slid into the seat, setting a stack of books on the table. It's packed in here today. It is, I agreed, glancing at the titles she brought with her. One was on photography, another on cooking, and the third was a novel I'd read years ago. Good taste in books, I added, pointing at the novel. Her eyes lit up. You've read it? Twice, I said with a grin. It's one of my favorites. And just like that, we were off. Her name was Grace, and we spent the next 2 hours talking about everything from literature to travel to the best places to get a decent burger in town. She was smart, funny, and unpretentious, a breath of fresh air I didn't realize I needed. When the conversation finally hit a lull, Grace looked at me thoughtfully and said, You seem complicated, like you've been through a lot. I smiled faintly. You could say that, but I'm figuring things out. She tilted her head, studying me for a moment. Well, for what it's worth, you're doing a good job of it. I don't know what it was about that simple statement, but it hit me like a bolt of lightning. For months, I'd been drowning in doubt, questioning every decision I made. But here was this woman, someone I just met, looking at me like I wasn't broken, like I still had value. Thanks, I said softly. I think I needed to hear that. We exchanged numbers before she left, and as I watched her walk out of the cafe, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Grace and I started seeing each other regularly after that. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, and I didn't want it to be. We took our time, learning each other's quirks and scars. She'd been through her own share of heartbreak. A fiancé who bailed on her 3 months before their wedding, but she carried it with grace. Her name suited her perfectly. On our 3rd date, we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, and she turned to me and said, You know, I don't think I've ever met anyone who makes me feel as comfortable as you do. It was a simple comment, but it meant the world to me. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, or trying to live up to someone else's impossible expectations. I could just be. As months turned into a year, Grace became a part of my life in a way I never thought possible. She wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my partner, my sounding board, my safe place. She brought joy back into my home, laughter back into my life, and hope back into my heart. One evening, as we were curled up on the couch watching an old movie, I looked at her and realized something I hadn't been able to admit to myself before. I loved her, not in the way I'd loved Anna, blindly, desperately, but in a way that felt real and steady, like it could weather any storm. I'm not perfect, I told her one night, my voice shaking. I've got a lot of baggage, and I'm still figuring some things out. Grace reached for my hand, her eyes meeting mine. No one's perfect, David, but you're enough. And I'm here for all of it. The good, the bad, and everything in between. And that was it. That was all I needed to hear. I don't know what the future holds for us, but for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that. Life is messy and unpredictable, but if I've learned anything, it's that even in the middle of heartbreak, there's always a chance for something beautiful to grow. With Grace, I found something beautiful, and for the first time in years, I'm ready to see where it takes me.